Hey everybody, welcome to Public Access America's Just the Tip. Hey, how you doing? I wanted to start this because I thought to myself, we all have this information in our heads that could help somebody else from falling into the same pitfalls that we fell in. So if you have one of those tips, a 1-sentence tip, 15 to 30 second tip, go ahead and make a voicemail and send that off to publicaccessamerica@gmail.com. Thanks. Your experiences matter and they could help somebody else. My tip is in creating accessible social media content. Keep your tweets or posts succinct and to the point. People with attention deficit disorders or reading disabilities may miss out on critical information if it's not first and foremost. That's my tip. What's yours?
It is time now for something positive.
We might be headed to the promised land,
Speaking the truth and finding our external liberty once we internally liberate ourselves.
Problem can only be solved when there is a kind of coalition of conscience.
Because that is how it works.
This is the beginning, it is not the finale, and that's why we're here, and that's why we rally.
We've got to be that creative minority.
Find a way to get in the way. I got in trouble. It was good trouble. It was necessary trouble.
Frankly, I know we've got to do something.
I was just adding it to my note. Breaking news on Public Access America. What? That's crazy. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to Public Access America. My name is still Jason. His name, I'm assuming, is still Jeffrey. And we are here, as we are every week, in our live stream to talk about the world and the weirdness going on in it from our perspective. Jeffrey, is this kind of what hell is? Is this one of the rungs of hell where you and I just sit in eternity talking about a world that's burning down around us?
The funny thing was I was having this conversation with somebody. They're like, what do you think happened? Like, where did we go wrong? And the running joke for me is that, if I had a time machine, I'd go back to 2015 and tell them not to shoot the gorilla at the zoo.
Yeah.
Because everything seemed to go to hell right after that.
I think it was right after 2012, believe it or not, the Mayan calendar, we discovered the God particle, and I think that messed us up. We finished the periodic table. We found the final element. We know where all 12 dimensions are, and now it's just like we're fucked up.
Well, I'm just waiting for, either the world-ending comet or asteroid or alien civilization to find us at this point because, fuck it, why not? Either it's going to be a weird day or I'm not going to have to go to work.
Right. I mean, where can it go from here, right?
I mean, honestly, you think about it, like what happens if aliens show up on this planet? Do you think anybody's going to go to work the next day?
I don't know. That's a weird sort of thing for me. It's one of those fun things that I imagine, but that I know isn't real. And so that's a tough one for me. My belief is that there's been five civilizations. We're in the latest civilization, and aliens are just people that have escaped the implosion of their civilization. That there isn't life from other worlds like on Pluto or something, but there is life out there that maybe, avoided their apocalypse and they're coming back down to get DNA because they're turning gray and they don't like it,
That's another one of those. I was having that conversation with somebody, and, when you think about, what we know about the universe, our estimate is that the universe is about 13.6 billion years old. Now, our tiny little rock floating around a star is about 4.6 billion years old. And in that time frame, all of written human history is condensed down into approximately what
5,000 years.
6,000 years.
Egypt is 5,000 years ago. Peru is 5,000 years ago.
But then you also have the Sumerians and all of that too, and that was right around that time as well. So I mean, you have, maybe even a little older. So you have all of these different civilizations. I mean, even like written language in China and Japan dates back, several thousand years.
Right. It's based on something.
So you have all of these different written forms, and all of what we understand history to be written is only 5,000 years old. Through fossil records, we're finding stuff, billions of years old that existed on this planet. It's non-complex life forms. I mean, the idea that we've had anything else complex living here is, we haven't found anything beyond, we haven't found anything that we would consider intelligent like us.
Right.
And and that's where it gets really interesting.
I just think it's hopping. The information that started this civilization was just a former civilization gathering what they could, hopping their apocalypse, landing in our time and dying, but leaving us as much information as they could. That's just what I think. You know what I mean? And what I think is cool is that, like, we're learning that Neanderthals were with Homo sapiens on the planet with like 4 other distinct forms of life, right? Like there was the small people in the Indonesias. They found a new species in Russia. It's just, and they were interbreeding and all that. And so when
you had Cro-Magnon, you had Homo sapien, you had Homo erectus.
But you had those off-skirt like hobbit people,
So even within that realm, what we understand, like, and what we understand might be pushing back about 150,000 years.
Right.
That's and compared to 4.6 billion years of our planet being what it is, that's still something amazing. But even if you just take a step back, just in our portion of the Milky Way galaxy, our star system isn't that old, and in the space of the universe's existence, it has only existed for approximately 1/3 of that time. So with our finite understanding of time and history, if, let's say, the world ended tomorrow, that would mean that in the course of that time, there could have been the potential that not just this, but 2 additional life-creating, stars, planets, etc., existed and disappeared from existence. Like, we have no idea what potential civilizations even just existed within this. Now, if you think about that, and now expand that to the fact that you have, hundreds of billions of stars in one galaxy, and then hundreds of billions of galaxies. The idea that somewhere out there isn't some form of intelligent life that has figured out things that we haven't, that has flourished and vanished from existence. I mean, it is a theoretical impossible that all that has ever existed in terms of life existed on this one little rock.
Agreed. I think that we are within life. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, like, quantum mechanics is a lot like the universe, studying the universe just on a different scale. Like, the cell rotates just like the universe does. You know what I mean? And I think in that there's a symmetry. There's like supposed to be 12 dimensions. Here's a great question for you. I never expected to ask. If there's 12 dimensions and we live within 3 of them, does that mean there's a total of 4 different places to go? Or could the next dimension over to us actually contain 6 dimensions and there might only be 2 places? You know what I mean? They keep saying that, quantum physics is complete with 12 dimensions. And I'm always wondering, but if we live in 3, like a fish lives in 2, if you pick a fish up, you move him into a 3rd dimension he never knew existed. Could we be picked up out of this universe and be shown like another 4 dimensions? It's so confusing to me, but this is where my mind wanders when I get high on a Saturday night and watch Ancient Aliens. You know what I mean?
So, so just to give you an idea, we live in 4 dimensions.
4?
That we can 4.
Okay.
Time is a dimension. So we live on an XYZ axis. That's how we're able to have 3D spindly noodles. But then the 4th is time. Now, there's all these wonderful questions. Number one, like how, because we're able to manipulate 3 dimensions, how do we manipulate the 4th dimension? That was part of Einstein's theory of relativity. Is that you couldn't. There were a couple of different ways that you could quote unquote manipulate time. Was number one, you literally fold it so that way you can travel faster than the speed of light. Or number 2, you punched a hole through the time dimension. Now, of course, this is all highly theoretical.
Right. You wouldn't actually be traveling faster than the speed of light. You'd just be going a shorter distance through time if you folded it.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you never actually go faster than the speed of light. You literally fold the dimension of time, or you punch through the dimension of time. And that's one of those ones where we have absolutely no idea how that's possible.
Yeah, where would you go? Where would you end up? That's so
well, and that's the grand question,
right?
Yeah. Right, and that's the grand question is we don't know.
You want to hear something weird about time? If you're at sea level, it moves at one rate. If you're in the mountains, it moves slower. If you're in space, it moves even slower. The further you get away from gravity, the slower time goes. And in that, you could stay up in space and come back down at a different time.
Yep. So. And that's something in and of itself that's absolutely fascinating, which is what lends to the idea of if we could fold time, what would that mean?
Right. God, who sings that song? If we could fold back time.
No, that's turn back time, and that's Cher. God damn it. So let's see here.
That's so funny.
Looking at some of these other dimensions. So 5th and 6th are where the notion of possible worlds arise. 5th dimension, we would see slightly different from our own. That would give us means for measuring similarity and differences between our world and other possible ones. 6 would be a plane of possible worlds where we could compare the position, compare and position all the possible universes that start with the same initial conditions. So this is where we're getting into multiverse theory.
Right.
And that's where it really gets interesting. 7th dimension, you have access to possible worlds that start with different initial conditions.
Wow, Rick and Morty.
So this would be like, if the Big Bang wasn't the Big Bang.
Right. If it started because a toaster popped up.
The 8th dimension gives us a plane of such possible universe histories with different initial conditions and branches out indefinitely. 9th dimension, compare all possible universe histories starting at all the different possible laws of physics. This only says there's 10. So the 10th and final dimension arrive at the point in which everything possible and imaginable is covered.
Wow.
So it's not until we hit like the 6th and 7th dimensions, the 5th, 6th, 7th dimensions, that we start getting into multiverse theory. Multiverse theory is really interesting to me.
It is.
I wonder if I'm an asshole in every single dimension.
I
think, or there was, or one of the funnier ones was, when John Oliver was interviewing Stephen Hawking, and John Oliver asked, so what you're saying is there's possibly a dimension out there where I'm smarter than you. And Stephen Hawking replies with, and a dimension where you're funny. I was like,
yeah,
that's that. Yeah, and I think that's one of the glories of, where we sit on the cusp of science. This is like these, there's a reason why I love the I don't know. Is because we don't necessarily deal with finalities,
right?
And that's one of those things where you could get into any number of philosophical arguments. Like, for example, we talk about in religion heaven and hell often. So the question then would be, are heaven and hell just different planes of existence that fall within one of the, 7 to 9 dimension, the 7th through 9th dimension, or 6th through 9th dimension?
Right. Or is it just an abstract of our own being?
Well, I think many a great philosopher have asked that question. Is it an idea that was simply made up to make, people behave and be good to each other? Or,
Yeah.
is this an actual plane of existence? I mean, to tell you, that's like, if you look at multiverse theory, there is nothing that says that the plane of heaven doesn't exist and the plane of hell doesn't exist. And so that's where it gets really interesting. And then, we also, especially in the Catholic Church, we talk about limbo a lot, or, so that way, where you're sitting there, purgatory,
right,
another word for it. And that idea of you're just kind of sitting there waiting, like it's just dead space.
Right. Well, I think that's a lot of what existence is. I was thinking about the devil, and I thought to myself, the thing about the devil is that religion is based on redemption, and the devil is unredeemable. And I don't get that oxymoron within religion, that we would give up on a fallen angel because he did something so bad we wouldn't continue to try and redeem him.
Well, and that's actually where, the difference in Catholic philosophy is versus, I would say, more of the sectarian Christianity.
Right.
It's not that Satan was not redeemable. It's that Satan refused to be redeemed, and that was the difference.
Interesting. Okay.
So, the concept was never that, you're completely unredeemable. It's that you had the choice to be redeemed, and people would actively make that choice to not be redeemed. And then that's where you fall in with, Satan, Lucifer, Morning Star, however you want to put it.
But we're all given those choices every minute of every day on which direction to go. And I think that's the point,
Exactly. And that there are people out there that refuse to be, refuse any type of redemption for themselves. And that's the reality is that, what the teaching really is about is that, you can make the choice to do right, to do good, or you can make the choice to do wrong. Redemption is there. You have to seek it.
Right.
And for those that refuse to seek it, there's only one place that awaits you. And that's what the lesson is he refused redemption.
Okay. Now, I like that. That's fine.
That's where a lot of people, think that, there's this great, the idea of this great other entity besides God, that, there was like this huge battle awaiting, and it's really more metaphorical about,
right.
The redemption was always there. It's just if you refuse to take it, that's all there is to it.
Right. There's only so many I told you so's the universe can give you before it just calls your number. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But in every movie, there's a bad guy that goes, "Oh, I want to be good now," and at the last minute, redeems himself and finds salvation. That's what the world is about. You can do that at any time in any sort of way, and that's practicing that in small individual ways is how you begin to do that and begin thinking that your decision can positively affect somebody else if you make it, or just yourself. And then you go on from there to where your decisions help more and more people or harm more and more people.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. I love these philosophical discussions. I try and stay away from religion because it's the one thing that I never even wanted to be educated on,
Well, and that's, for me, like having grown up in the church and being the kind of person that I am, where I've read the Bible front to back 3 times, at least the Catholic version of the Bible. And of course, that's where, I have to tell people, it's like, there are multiple versions of the Bible. It's just, every sect has different books included or excluded or whatever.
Right.
Or, they interpret messages differently. Some are like some sects, they interpret it like extremely literally. Whereas, even within Catholicism, like we took more of a metaphorical approach, and
Right.
even understood the history behind some of the writings. Like, for example, Revelations, where they talk about the cities burning, it echoes Rome and Rome burning under Nero. Like it
Right.
pretty much is like match for match, and even still, in a historical context, when you look at what was happening in Rome, you can literally put that on a number of different civilizations where you
Uh-huh.
had a leader who didn't give a shit and the world was burning around them,
Time is
and the people were left to
cyclical.
serve. Exactly. So, it was the understanding that, there were all of these different metaphors for what the end times would look like. And
Mm-hmm.
even still, one of the things that we constantly, had said was is that you don't know when the end time is, period, end of story. And that's why, you have all these people who try to predict when the end of the universe is, when the end of the world is, when Jesus is
Right.
going to return. And we made it very clear, there's what most people don't understand is that there are multiple ends of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer isn't just, Jesus shows up. You've got things like, for example, what happens when your lights go out for the last time and you lay down and that's it. But in a sense, that is the end of the universe because
Exactly.
you don't exist in it anymore. And
Or do you?
or there's any number of different possibilities of
Mm-hmm.
what the end looks like.
Yeah.
It only says that, in the end Jesus will come for you. And so the question is is it kind of like the bus where, you have a bunch of souls waiting and one day Jesus shows up and goes, "All right, everybody on the bus." Or is it more of an individual approach where when your time comes and you expire, you supposedly have, Jesus waiting to take you home.
Yeah.
There's all of these different philosophical and theoretical possibilities behind it, but that was the lesson is that there was no predictability in what the end was. There were certain signs that, if you look at civilization in general, yeah, that's pretty accurate. If you have great wars, for example, which when you look at the time of Europe and you look at the way that, how Rome was sacked, yeah, the civilized world looked to be falling apart at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at, famine, disease, plagues, you had any number of different, crop failures and, the Black Death deciding that it needed 3 world tours. The reality is that there were multiple different conditions of the end. And every single time humanity has made it out of that. I'm not saying not worse for the wear, but survived, yes.
Right.
And of course, you had a number of people that were like, oh, this, especially with COVID, oh, this is the flu, oh, this is the end of the world. And I'm like, yeah, once again, if it is the end of the world, then, here's my bus ticket. Until then I'm going to keep riding.
It's the end of the world for someone.
It is. And of course, now with the threats of World War III and nuclear holocaust, at this point I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm just going to go with chaotic neutral on this one. I'm either going to like, get naked and put my ass up in the air and try to catch an atomic bomb, or I'll just walk out naked with a cooler of beer and a hot dog on a stick, and I'm just going to point it towards, the mushroom cloud and see if I
Yeah.
can get myself a nuclear hot dog. The idea that, the idea of being terrified of the end, especially having been dead twice, just doesn't work for me
Right.
because I'm not afraid of what happens when the lights go off for the last time. In fact, there's a lot of comfort for me in the fact that at some point this is done and it's over. Yeah, there's this huge looming question of what the fuck happens after that. And the answers that you have to be comfortable with are maybe something, maybe nothing.
Yeah.
And like every other adventure in life, you just have to be willing to accept the fact that there are things well beyond your control, and you're only going to find out once you get there.
Agreed. I think you need to just be able to have the life at the end to where you can take a breath and go. Like when you dive into water, before you shoot a gun or shoot an arrow, you take a breath to calm yourself and then do what needs to be done. I think you need to work towards a life where you don't have these regrets on your head so you can go on. That's it, you know. I think also, I think the problem with religion is that to get the full picture, you need to read all three of the major religions, right? You need the Torah, you need the Bible, and you need Muslims. What is it? The Torah? No, what is it? The Muslim Bible.
Torah, Quran.
Quran, thank you. But I also think we're missing the Mayan version, which I think really goes in with that.
Well, you also have the Chinese I Ching. You have
Yeah,
any number.
I get those.
There's
And India is
there's so
huge too, but
many. Yeah.
I think those are telling stories more here. I think the other religions have a different take on it. Like India seems to want to say this is what we saw in the times that we were here, right? Like this is a recording of history. And China's religion is like a recording of history. But like Buddhism, that I think is more transcendent. And I think Jesus has a more transcendent message, and the Quran and the Torah do too. And the Mayans with their calendars, they all seem to have a bigger picture than, say, recording events on Earth, you know? And so to get the full picture, you need information on all of that. And I wish we would update the Bible again. King James updated it what, 2,000 years ago? Shouldn't we update it now and make it more relative to today's learnings and lessons and morals and characters?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things that you could possibly do with it, and that's what makes it so intriguing and interesting.
Nobody cool could translate the Bible into today's terms because nobody cool puts that much investment into it, you know?
Well, I mean, and the reality is that you're looking at a world that doesn't really have a whole lot of homogenized views anymore.
Yeah.
Like just because you have such a wide and diverse population. And so, like, for example, when you think about where the state of some parts of the world are, where women are still considered property versus here where they're considered their own independent functioning beings. I mean, even like just something just as simple as that, there's no way that you're going to quote unquote have a new Bible that's going to become universal. And in fact, that's what I would argue. That's what I would argue is that all of these new interpretations have been, from just looking at the Abrahamic religions, because that's more what I have is you have the Old Testament, which Jewish.
Yeah.
And then you had the Word 2.0, which included a lot more about how being saved and eternal life was a thing. And then for Muslims, you had 3.0, because Jesus is a central figure within their work as well. And that's the difference is that there were times in which you could have these 3.0s,
Mm-hmm.
and some would argue that they have 4.0. And
well, I do, yeah.
And for as much as some of us look at it and go, yeah, no, that's definitely not it.
But I also think that it's like saying, oh, I like John Wick 3, but I don't really believe John Wick 1 and 2 existed.
Mm-hmm.
To me, like to get the full picture, you got to see the whole trilogy in its power and glory. And also spirituality is just one dimension of human existence. It doesn't answer everything, but it's there to answer like the edges of everything.
I think for me, it was always, the way that I looked at it is it was supposed to be a great moral guide on how to navigate life in this plane of existence. The idea that, don't kill people, don't be a jackass and take people's stuff, be kind to one another, look out for each other. Then there's, of course, some of the other ones like don't worship false gods and all of that other stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
I think it's there to answer the unexplainable until we explain it. And then spirituality is still the outer edge of that, It's not about disproving spirituality. It's just about proving existence, and spirituality will always be around that. Until you prove the entire universe.
And that's where, some people really look at it and it's like, science explains the how something works. We know how light travels. We know how we have a pretty good idea of how old the universe is based on the level of tools that we have. We have a great understanding of how certain things exist. Why the Big Bang was the Big Bang, we have no idea.
We barely know how light moves. We just discovered that it has a sound wave and a light wave. It's in 2 dimensions coming to us. This what is that? The split theory?
So light moves as a particle and as a wave.
Right. I mean, we're just learning about this stuff. Here's a concept I never thought of. We just discovered dark matter, right? Then that might prove that we are in fact not being held on the earth by gravity, but being pushed down on the earth by dark matter.
Well, that's where it gets interesting is that, from what we can tell, like I said, what we can tell,
right?
That doesn't seem to be it at all. It seems to be like a great canceller of things that have gone rogue, from what we can tell.
Interesting. But we're just learning about this stuff. I think it's so cool.
So you have matter, you have dark matter, you have antimatter, which is different from dark matter.
Right. It sucks in matter.
It literally is the cancellation of matter.
Right.
It literally turns it into non-existence.
And it's out there in the universe, by the way, eating millions of, I can't starlight measurements of universe.
So with all of that, just remember, there is so much out there that is so fantastic and so beautiful. Don't choose to be a dick. Right. Don't choose to be a dick to everybody else.
And also, all of that universe and beauty and mystery, it's extrapolated into every cell of you. You know what I mean? You are a part of that. We're all made up of the stardust that came from and through the universe. It's all part of one thing. So cool. And on that note, so a journalist was killed in Russia or in Ukraine in a Russian attack. I like our conversation better, buddy. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
I like that so much better. But a journalist was killed in Ukraine. So my question is, it's so weird. I don't know how to segue to this. It was such a horrible segue. Thanks for listening to Public Access America. We started this episode with a new series that we're going to be starting the episodes with. And it's called Just the Tip. And what we're going to be doing is just 1 minute quick tips about different aspects of life. This one is on how to create more accessible social media content, and that's just by keeping your posts succinct and to the point for people with cognitive disabilities and reading disabilities. It helps when the point is first and foremost. So my question about this is, when are we going to stop worrying about hitting Putin's red line and start making him worry about hitting ours? Somebody said, what can we do for Ukraine? And I said, for some reason, it doesn't make sense to me that we can't put NATO forces just in there to, around a nuclear facility and say, we're not trying to attack you. We're just standing here. Don't attack us, and make him worry about confronting us. You know what I mean?
Well, that's where this would get fun.
Let's put our asses on the table,
Well, and basically in all of the conversations, we've never really talked about what our red line is. And I think that's
right.
Important.
We need to start
thinking really about important. That. And I say that because as you've heard, you have Putin, raising the nuclear readiness of his own forces.
He's testing our red line. Did we jump? Did we jump across the Ukraine border when he said nuclear? Did we jump when he attacked the nuclear facility? He's testing our red line.
and now with the most recent potential threat of chemical weapons deployment,
Mm-hmm.
you have this question of, if chemical weapons are deployed in Ukraine, is that a red line for anybody in the world?
Right.
And this is where you have the issue of NATO involvement versus what I would say, a general world involvement.
But just really quickly
And
before we get past that, I want to say this is like a child being a brat, asking you where boundaries are. If you don't tell them where the boundary is, they're going to constantly look for it. Okay, sorry.
so there's been all of this conversation surrounding NATO this, NATO that.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be a point where NATO, in a sense, gets put aside because the world has a general obligation to do something greater.
Right.
And that needs to be the conversation. It's like, NATO is a defensive clause, absolutely. And the idea is that if you attacked a NATO member, all other NATO members would come to the defense of that nation.
Which happened on 9/11, right?
But at some point, there has to be the discussion of what it looks like to go in and defend a people, not because it's a NATO thing, but because
It's a human thing.
It's a European thing. It's a human thing to do.
Right.
And that's and I would argue that the United States has had precedent in doing that, and that precedent needs to be set again if that is something we want to do. Now, I'm going to say this: do I want us to be involved in a war? No, I don't. Nobody should want that.
No.
And that's the difference. But there is a point in which you have to look at two things. Number one is, at what point are you literally foregoing humanity just because you're afraid of somebody else?
Right.
Like, at some point, the world has to decide what is happening in Ukraine is not acceptable. And it's not about taking over Russia. It's about protecting Ukraine.
That's right.
And that it's not a NATO coalition thing. It is a world coalition thing. And here's where we saw something similar to that play out. Look at Kuwait and Iraq, Desert Storm. The issue wasn't that we were going to go in and depose Saddam. I mean, there were people that wanted to at that time. But the issue was that it was about getting the Iraqis out of Kuwait. And that is what has to be looked at. And what happened there was you had a coalition of Arab forces that said, we will defend Kuwait and we will go in with you if we can all agree on what the mission is.
Right.
And that's what happened. And sure, there were people who wanted to push into Baghdad and they wanted to take out Saddam. But it was made very clear that the operation was solely to get control of Kuwait.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
Saddam wanted a land bridge to the coast, the Gulf, so that he could get his oil out and not have to pay Kuwait to do that. And then Iran started hitting Saddam's boats. And then so Saddam started hitting their boats. And we were like, oh, you're disrupting oil supply. We got to step in now.
Well, and that, and there was also these undertones that what was happening was Kuwait was setting up oil wells next to Iraq's border,
right?
Horizontal drilling in and sucking Iraq's oil out. There was that whole issue as well as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, what it boiled down to was
weapons of mass destruction. We throw that in there too. Then
that one didn't really come up to play. But the issue was that Iraq was broke after fighting Iran for a number of years.
Right.
And so they needed money. And what sells? Oil sells. So that's what happened. They were trying to recoup their costs that way. Now,
and that land bridge that Saddam was trying to create through Kuwait was also on the border of Iran.
Yep. So that's where having a military precedent like that, where Europe has to agree, not NATO, Europe has to agree to go in and perform a well, for lack of better words, we'll just use the Russian term, a special military operation
Right.
in order to protect the people of Ukraine. Period.
That's
End of
right.
story.
In that
And
Iraq,
that's what and that's where this would be not a NATO thing, but a world coalition thing. Now, do I think China will get involved? No,
I think they're
I do not
actively
think.
against us. I think so is Saudi Arabia and Iran.
I think I don't think they would get. The reason why I don't think they would get involved is that we're their biggest trading partner. They're not going to fuck up their
Didn't
bottom
they
line
just get
for Russia.
involved? Didn't they just get
No,
involved by creating misinformation about chemical weapons?
did they? No, they're
Like
spreading it. They
I'm
didn't
just
create
hearing.
it.
Okay, they're just spreading it. They didn't create
They're
it.
just
All right.
spreading it.
All
Yeah.
right.
And even then, there's been a larger question.
And
There's
let's
been
not
a
forget
larger
about
question of
India that refuses to say that Russia's invading Ukraine.
but
That is a whole mass of the world that is not on our side,
but they're also not on Russia's side either. And that's the other thing. You
Well,
have
they're
to keep
still
in mind.
buying. They still get weaponry from Russia. These are people
And
like
they're also still buying stuff from us. India
Right.
has a long history of being, well, that's where the term the third world comes from. Is if you
Ah.
were first world, you were aligned with the US. If you were
Woo.
second world, you were aligned with the USSR.
Ooh.
And if you were third world, you weren't aligned with any of them.
Okay.
You
Savages.
literally just kind of worked with whoever. And that's something that India has always maintained. They've
Okay.
always it's not that they're neutral, it's that they don't limit who they work with.
I gotcha. Okay.
It's not like
So they
Switzerland or
abstained. They abstained. They didn't, say they were opposed to Russia's movements or against it. They just abstained from having an opinion.
Exactly. They
Gotcha.
kind of view it as, we're not involved with it, so it's not our thing to really get involved with.
Okay.
Well, whereas, you have, the Russian bloc, and some of the former Soviet republics seeing it as an Eastern thing, and you have, Europe and the United States and its allies seeing it as a Western issue. So that's the difference. It's disappointing to hear what the Indian opinion is on it, just because we do think that there's a pretty clear-cut problem in what Russia is doing, but at the same time too, we also have to understand that they have maintained that sense of not neutrality, but abstention from certain things, simply because it does not taking a position on it one way or the other doesn't benefit them in either way. So going back to that, we have precedent in creating world coalitions or large enough coalitions to go in and that way it's not just a US thing going in and squaring off against Russia. It's
Right.
the entirety of the European continent going in and saying this is a problem,
And it
or
looks like
the majority of the European continent going in and saying this is a problem.
it looks like Poland is on our side if we were to do that, right? With these
Yes.
airplanes, because they don't want to send the airplanes in, but they want Ukraine to have those airplanes. Republicans want Ukraine to have those airplanes, but nobody can agree on how to get those airplanes there without crossing a red line,
Well, that's the problem is
That is the
Russia,
problem.
and this is where problem number 2 comes in, and this one actually worries me a lot more than problem number 1. So what we have done with this situation is capitulated to a certain extent
Mm-hmm.
that we're not going to get involved if a nuclear power is involved, i.e. Russia.
Right.
So what we are effectively telling the world, especially the smaller countries and despots of the world, is the United States, if you are a nuclear power, especially a nuclear superpower, we will not get involved if you threaten us. And if that is the line in the sand that people are going to draw, what you're going to see is a lot of countries develop nuclear weapons for the very strategic purpose of, well, the US won't square off with somebody who's got nukes.
Right.
So, and that's an issue in and of itself.
There's a lot of issues leading us to isolationism across the world that way. By weaponizing the dollar, economists say that by weaponizing the dollar, we're actually telling other countries that we can weaponize the dollar, and that would be scary to another country,
I mean, you look at what's happened with Russia's market. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm curious. How much is a dollar? Rubles to dollars.
Yeah, well, because Russia actually offered every dead Russian soldier 5 million rubles, in a compensation for the loss of their loved one, And really quickly, while you're reading, right before that Kuwait war, Saudi Arabia was scared that their boats were going to get shot out of the water and their oil was going to go to the bottom of the strait. So they had us put American flags on their ships so they would have safe passage, right? And now Saudi Arabia is not even taking our phone calls. And that's a problem, There's a real separation between good and evil starting. And I think there's going to become a dark economy between this India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, North Korea, because North Korea's market will suddenly be booming and open in a dark economy. It's not going to be sanctioned in a dark economy,
Right. So right now, just to give you an idea, basically the ruble is worth half of what it was at the beginning of the war, because it was worth about 1.45 cents.
Okay.
And now it's worth about 0.0075 cents.
Right.
So it's literally about half of what it was.
Yeah, it's like having Starbucks bucks at McDonald's, right?
Oh man.
Hey, congratulations to McDonald's for getting out of Russia. That was a big investment they gave up on, And now Putin's like, we're going to seize all the assets if you leave. That's crazy. That's just crazy. That guy's just attacking everybody. Is he suffering from like long hauler syndrome?
There's been a lot of questions.
Syphilis?
There's been a lot of questions. Well, something. There's been a lot of questions, to be perfectly honest. And what they're wondering is he isolated himself a lot during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's questions about his mental health and integrity in that realm.
I think he's just being a brat. I think nobody ever stopped him before, right? Nobody stopped him in Georgia, Crimea, Donbass, and then he started attacking countries. I started thinking, his cyber attacks nearly took down America, right? 350 million people. The only reason it didn't take down Ukraine is because they knew it, they recognized it, they saw it on their front line, fought against it, and they were fighting for democracy. They still are, because they recognized it. But places like Moldova, Estonia, these places, they don't have the protection that we have, and a cyber campaign in those countries could decimate those so easily before Putin ever stepped foot in there. Well,
you've also seen the rise too of a lot of the systems that are being defended by private entities.
Wow.
Microsoft actually stepped in and stopped a number of cyber attacks against Ukraine.
Fuck yeah, Microsoft. I like you. If you were more accessible, I would support you, because you really do things in this world.
I mean, on a similar note, the current CEO's son just passed away, and a lot of people have said that his son, who I want to say had MS or something like that, was the reason why Xbox's adaptive controller got developed. So, because his kid could never play video games due to accessibility issues, and so the adaptive controller got developed as a way to help, people with disabilities.
I'm going to say that corporations aren't opposed to instituting accessibility, but disabled people, they think they all want to be unique and say, I'm the only one that needs this. And if I don't struggle through it, I have no more disabled identity. So they don't want to come together on means of accessibility that could be created for them. It's a real struggle, Jeffrey, in the disabled community.
Well,
it really is. And it's so frustrating.
I can only imagine.
I mean, I don't want to be a jerk. Black people have BLM. They can rally around criminal justice reform and equality, right? Women, they have women's rights movements, women's marches. Disabled people are like, no, I'm special. Sorry, being a disabled person, I can say that. That's me. Public Access America.
It's always funny because, like, especially because as libertarians, we get a ton of shit, even amongst other libertarians.
I think political philosophy is a lot like religion, and where there's moments you have to go on faith and trust what somebody else is saying.
The main focus is just like less dependence on the government because, well, we've seen how that's gone.
And you don't have to do that if you think about it in a human way.
More dependence on connections with each other.
You can always bring it back to what would one human do for another? What would 100 do for 100?
People looking out for people.
Find Public Access America anywhere you find your favorite podcast every Sunday and Thursday. And join the chat on YouTube at Public Access America every Sunday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Communities looking out for community.
Public Access America. History in the making history in the making, in the making, in the making, in the making, in the making.
I mean, hey, you know what? You're allowed to say that. You have the card,
Right?
But you see that with any number of different groups and organizations. I mean, even if you look at something as simple as Occupy Wall Street back in 2011. It started out with one goal, but then it split into two because somebody wanted a different set of goals met compared to the other group.
Oh yeah.
And then that's the thing is that you just watched as all of these groups splintered and splintered and splintered and splintered until there was no longer a cohesive demand or desire or wish list. And eventually everybody just kind of went, okay, whatever.
I think about that with women's rights because Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton fought for women's rights. But then there was a splinter group from within that wanted a more progressive version of women's rights. And out of those two groups split another camp that was anti-ERA for fear of having a responsibility in the situation. And then from there, Frederick Douglass came in and said, hey, can you put that all on the back burner while we fight for our rights as Black people? And that's just within that one issue. And that's why I always say nobody's ever going to congeal on one thing except humanity. It's the only thing we all have in common. Otherwise, we're going to fracture on every single other issue. Because while I see red as this big, bright color behind us, you see red in a different way. And we're never going to see everything identically. Never. That's the joy of life. That's the joy of having this discussion where we all see things slightly differently,
And that's just it is that, we all have the same, wants and desires. And the question becomes, how do we help each other achieve that goal?
Like, or stay out of the way,
For example, do I need a pair of glasses that if I pick something up and hold it up to my face, it's going to say that it's a can of condensed cream of mushroom soup? No, but I think it should exist because it'll help somebody else like you out there.
But it will also help you. It'll also, if the technology came to a point where everybody was going to use it like text was for the deaf. Now we all use text. And I would bet that you would love a tool where you could be taking care of a baby and just mindlessly looking around and getting like what's in your view, where are my keys? Keys. Okay. Yeah.
Or for example, like, at some point, I guarantee you, right now you're seeing what I would argue is the beginning of automation of certain simple tasks, things that take time that we literally can't afford to spend.
Right.
And the ability for machines to read what these things are is important.
Benefits everyone.
Well, it has benefited people in being able to, number one, catalog inventory and figure out how much of something they have. But number two, as that improves, what you're going to have is machines that are capable of picking out things for people and having them ready for you to pick up.
Yep.
And that's what I would argue that a lot of, these curbside pickups have become is It's what I would call the pre-alpha version of automated delivery, automated self pickup and delivery. And so the answer there is that when the system is able to figure out, hey, if I look at this and I know that this is a Campbell's condensed cream of mushroom soup, the system can go through and go, okay, if I don't have the Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, can I get the Campbell's cream of mushroom low sodium? Will that be an acceptable substitute? Or, hey, how about the store brand cream of mushroom soup? Is that an acceptable one? And so you'll teach these systems how to recognize what acceptable substitutes are. And you're actually kind of seeing this in memes right now, where, you know, Walmart is like, hey, sorry, we didn't have cream of mushroom soup. How about toilet paper? And it's like,
Right.
what the fuck?
My personal shopper is great with that stuff, you know. And I and sometimes overboard too, you know. Sometimes they go a little, did you want this or this? It's the same thing. No, one's the generic, one's the, but they're both the same color, but they're different products. I don't care. But
put it in the bag.
But it's so awesome. But it's also annoying because I'm trying to, you know, make my life easier by shopping, not fill the time I would have spent shopping by answering the shopping questions. But then there's other shoppers that are like, I just substituted it. And I'm like, thank you. So, you know, but I love it. I wanted to say, like, with DoorDash, you know, you spend like $12 extra to get crappy food an hour later. But with Instacart, you just order your food and you make it right there. It's like the reverse of fast food. You're getting the food, making it the way you want, and it's hot and perfect the way you like it when it's ready. And I like that. So get off of DoorDash, get onto Instacart and eat better, because junk food is junk.
And so eventually what you will see, and this, especially as like robot technology improves, you will have robots that will be capable of, number one, going through aisles and picking things out.
Right.
But I would argue, number two, that what you would end up having is distribution centers, like that'll be able to take some of those robots, and it's, you know, you'll have, number one, like for larger operations, for example, they'll be like, all right, flat of this, package it, gone, next one.
Right.
And then for individuals, you'll have robotic shoppers that go through the aisles, and it's like, oh, hey, we're out of this one, how about this one? Perfect, grab it.
Yep.
And it'll know inherently, because the thing about data is that each decision gets logged, and what happens is it starts to develop these patterns of, oh, well, when this gets selected, there is a 80% likelihood it is accepted.
Yeah.
Next one is going to be this one. Next one's going to be this one. And as that data builds, all of a sudden these shoppers, these robotic shoppers, become more self-sufficient.
Yeah, it's called reorder points. The world lives on reorder points, and if you want your groceries to be affordable, stay consistent with your shopping so the store knows what they need to buy every month.
And that's where all those, little shopper cards come in handy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hey, this person buys this. All right, I know that I need to buy it on this schedule.
Right.
And the more that you have of that. But with these robotic shoppers, essentially what you will have is you will have a worker that can work around the clock. You'll have someone who's like, yeah, no, just have my order ready for me in 24 hours. So you'll have somebody that's like, yeah, I need it within a couple hours, because as soon as I get off work, I'm going to pull up and I need it.
Right.
And in people, you'll have that option of, 24 hour, if you pick this up in if you choose the 24-hour option, your order it'll only cost you, say, $5 to have your robotic shopper pick this up. But if you choose the 2-hour option, yeah, it's going to cost you a premium, because you're going to have to expend a resource in order to make this a priority.
That's silly, because delivery is free, and priority delivery within the hour is $2 on Instacart. That's ridiculous. Just get it delivered. And also, Instacart, you should be given those discounts you give to pickups to deliveries for people on disabilities too, by the way.
So there's a number of ways in which I do believe we will see things change. And it's not that you won't see people going into the grocery store to go shopping. I think there will be a new norm at some point of robots coming in, doing the shopping for certain groups of people. And yeah, it's not going to be like, having somebody like Instacart come in and be like, okay, I'm picking this one, and go.
Right.
But you will have I would say 16 hours, where these robots are going to be able to fulfill certain orders and have them ready to either A, go out for pickup, or B, go, wait for, say, some sort of final check from, a
Right.
person, or final things that, had to be refrigerated or whatever.
I like it. What's really cool is that farms are doing this, where there's certain farms in your community that don't know how much to plant or what to plant, and they don't want to guess. So they take orders in advance for like meat or rutabagas or carrots, or somebody will order 5 pounds of potatoes at the end of the season, and they'll give you 5 pounds in the course of the season for your order ahead of time. You pay them ahead of time for the potatoes, then they grow what's needed,
Mm-hmm.
I love that stuff. I love this world. I have a question about farming, but I'm going to say thank you for listening to Public Access America. We will be back after this song.
To those who would tear the world down, we will defeat you. This is our moment. This is our time. To those who seek peace and security, we support you. Yes, we can. And to all those who have wondered if America's beacon still burns as bright, tonight we prove once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals, democracy, liberty, opportunity, and unyielding hope.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbow. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life.
Ask not.
Yes, we can.
What your country can do for you.
I have a dream.
Ask what you can do for your country.
I, poor little children, yes, we can.
One day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression.
In this lifetime, you don't have to prove nothing to nobody except yourself.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Welcome to Public Access America.
Yes, we can.
Sunday live streams on YouTube,
I wanted to run out of that tunnel for my dad.
on Twitter,
What?
Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Smart Radio Public, and Spotify.
Yes, we can.
Public Access America. History in the making, making history in the making.